Greetings all, and welcome to this short topical interview. We're here to talk today about this recent article from Harvard Business Review on becoming a data-driven organisation and how difficult this seems to be for many organisations. First, let's do some quick introductions. I'm Rob, founder of the data consultancy Fleet Beyond, and I'm here today with Kees Klien. Welcome, Kees. Greetings.
Thank you, Rob.
Why don't we start out with you saying a little bit about yourself and your role at ING?
Yeah, so my name is Kees Klien. I lead an expert team in data analytics, which basically means I am responsible for executing data analytics related change across ING. Before working in ING, I worked in McKinsey for 7 years, doing mainly banking transformations. And before that, I worked for 5 years in the Dutch Marine Corps as an officer, looking at other types of change.
Welcome, Kees. Thanks for joining us today. And so, onto the article. To be fully transparent, I really like this article. I think it really summarises a lot of the different challenges and opportunities in becoming data-driven. And to give some context here, well, Gartner, McKinsey, and MIT Sloan have also regularly performed similar surveys and analyses over the last several years, amongst others, with very similar conclusions. Being data-driven, this is hard. And it continues to be hard. Kees, you and I have discussed this topic quite a few times at this point. And do you agree with the findings in HPR? Is this still challenging to become a data-driven company?
Yeah, I think I fully agree with the findings. We actually worked on our data strategy just now, and this was one of the key sort of starting points for us to look back at what did we say 3 years ago and where are we now. And we're realizing it's not as easy as we thought initially. And on the other hand, also the bar is raising in the sense that we need to be able to use our data much better. I think one of the main things I wanted to add to this article is what being data-driven is not a goal in itself. It's a means to an end. So I think where we've struggled a lot, and maybe other organizations have as well, is that we fail to realize that ultimately being data-driven should deliver value to ourselves, to our customers, and sometimes we miss that. And that's typically the initiatives that have not really worked out. And now we're taking a bit of a step back and saying, look, we need to make sure that actually these initiatives deliver value. But on the other hand, we do believe there's a lot of value in data and being data-driven. So that is, I think, one of the key things I wanted to add to this article.
Yeah, I mean, building for the business case is so very, very important. And when we talk about becoming data-driven, that's really a large-scale transformation for organizations, right? And large-scale transformations, they require embracing change, really opening your arms and welcoming in the change that comes with data. And of course, Kees, you have a particularly interesting viewpoint on that, working within such a large and highly regulated sector within a large organization and with a change management position. So can you talk a bit about how easy or difficult it is to embrace change at that level?
Yeah, I think the article nicely stresses this is about a cultural change as well. I think referring back to your comment on the business case, what actually sort of is difficult is to sort of build the business case up front and saying this is the amount I'm going to invest in getting data under governance, which is usually a very big amount, and this is the value I'm going to deliver out of it, because that value is not always clear up front. So we've actually took a step back and said, and we do sort of realize there is value, but we want to lower the cost side of things. So in starting this transformation, we put in place a lot of expensive things, so expensive technology, work around defining the correct definitions, work around understanding data lineage, data ownership. And now we took a step back and said, look, not for all data we need that type of expensive governance. So let's at least sort of make sure this data is available. That is relatively cheap. And then, depending on how we use it, we will invest more or less in it. And so I think that is one of the key things that we realized as ING.
One of the strange things about the conclusions in the article that I found, one thing that struck me, is they say that actually it might even be getting harder to become data-driven these days. One of the quotes from the article is that Fortune 1000 companies reported a decline in the success of their data and AI investments. Have you got any opinions? Why do you think that is? Are things getting harder, Kees?
Well, I think we also coming to realize things are harder than they actually appeared up front. So that is one aspect. When you would have asked us 3 years ago, we had a very different timeline of where we would be now than we are actually where we actually are. On the other hand, I think there is this point of making sure you actually deliver value from a business case. I think what also organizations, including ING, have struggled to do is really embrace that data. Being data driven is something for the full organization. And so when we talk about a CDO or a chief analytics officer, then also in ING we have sometimes said, look, getting this data and using it is a problem for the CDO. It's a problem for the chief analytics officer. But in fact, that's not going to work because you need the full organization to take charge of using the data, making sure it's available, and making sure it's of the right quality. So what we are now doing as an organization as well, in ING we work agile, so we work best DevOps, and we want to take the next step and work best Dev Data Ops. So also bring the data people from these data organizations close into the business tribe to actually make sure that the people in the business become data fluent and use the data to create value.
To my mind, that kind of embedding is so critical in the process of embracing change, right? Bringing people along for the journey from the beginning to the end, not applying some prescription to those people, but allowing them to discover and learn and take that journey together. So is that more the approach that's being taken now at ING? Indeed.
And I think one other thing that you do in that way is obviously you can sort of try from a central perspective, from the top perspective, to define the business cases that deliver most value. But ultimately, the people that know best are the people that work on a day-to-day basis with the customers. And so bringing our data experts close to these people and making sure they discuss with them on what brings most value is something that is actually much more effective than trying to sort of design the top-down type of transformation on how we become data-driven.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, letting it be an emergent phenomenon, right? That it's coming from all parts of the business and based on business value. That seems super critical to me. And I'd like to touch on a couple of the points that you mentioned in passing across this. One about lowering the barrier for entry. So not necessarily reducing the cost in terms of a monetary sense, but reducing the level of requirements needed to start these innovation processes, from, as we'd say, just the drempel to get into that innovation space. And for me, that's quite a challenge at large organizations to get them to recognize this kind of barrier they put in place. But also because I think that speed, actually just velocity in these initiatives, is incredibly important. And one of the reasons I think that is that technology in this space is evolving so fast that if you don't achieve something quickly, by the time you reach the end of your several years project, the technology you want to use is completely different to what you start off at the beginning with. So building things fast, so reducing the barrier to entry so things can happen quickly, and then building them modular so that you can replace different bits and pieces as it goes on, I think it's very important in this world of data analytics. I'd like to ask what your thoughts were on that.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. I think technology is key to sort of becoming data driven. And I think, and maybe to add to your point on that, is that what we have been doing historically is we've been building this technology for technology people mostly. And that means that if I have an analytics type of question, I need to go to analytics people to first understand my question, and then they need to apply the technology. And by the time you get to an answer, maybe the business question has already changed. What we're now doing is also making sure that we open up this technology much more, and making sure that it's usable to all the staff in our organization. So I think that is another key aspect in what we see in the technology world, is that you really need to allow people to do this type of data-driven work, and they don't have to go to someone to explain them or do it for them.
And this kind of, you're mentioning here something that we might call like an analytics translator role, or which is not necessarily a new person in the organization with a new job title, but it's somebody who takes on this mantle, right? Wears this hat, tries to connect those, bridge those gaps and connect those people together. But I think ING is certainly not the only company that's struggling on this. To come back to the article, they say that 92.2% of mainstream companies report that they continue to struggle with cultural challenges and resistance or lack of understanding to enable the change. And that really echoes, I think, what you're saying here. I mean, it really gels with what I've been seeing over the last several years. That it's quite hard to embed this change throughout an organisation. And but what do you think to that? Is that the same kind of thing you see in ING?
Yeah, I think it is, and I think being data driven can be starting with any question. So if you look at, for example, COVID as an example, we see companies now debating on what's sort of the best way forward. Do we work from home? Do we work remotely? And what I think a data-driven company should do is should look at this type of question and say, do we have the data to actually answer this question? And if we don't, can we figure out an experiment to actually get the data to answer this question? And so this is something that we are now, for example, also doing in ING. We are experimenting with bringing people back to the office in certain ways and shapes, and then measuring how happy are they, how productive are they, is this actually working? And by sort of being data driven, and we take out all the sort of noise on personal beliefs on what used to be working or what's better or not, and we bring it back to the essence, productivity, employee happiness, errors, all these sort of things.
I think that's a really interesting point, because I think a lot of the time the kind of data-driven story does not really talk necessarily about the internal workplace of a data-driven company, how that really affects the work life of an employee. A lot of the time the focus is on the customer experience or on digital intelligence, like making better marketing campaigns, and not actually related to things like, well, can we replace this process with a digital process internally?
Yeah, well, I'm not saying these questions are not important, but I'm just saying any question that you could ask in an organization, or you also relate to a customer, there should be a data-driven answer. Yeah. So are our customers happier about us closing branches or not? That's something we can measure. So these things, I think, separate a true data-driven organization from an organization that says that it's data-driven, but doesn't really sort of embrace being data-driven, because they don't really use data to answer all the questions they have.
And you mentioned a bit about the coronavirus effects of 2020. I mean, so 2020 was not just a year in data, it was also a year of very unexpected challenges across all sectors. From my perspective, looking across multiple sectors, I've seen companies in the same market, right? Almost sister companies in the same sector react in completely opposite ways to the same stimulus of there being a global pandemic. And in my mind, I'm relating this to fundamentally to the company structure. I mean, some companies have used this as a reason to completely double down on innovation, to go completely digital, to completely change their customer experience, and often change their core business as well. Whereas other companies have used this as a stimulus to cancel the majority of their innovation programs, even if they were effectively competitors in the same country, in the same market, providing the same kind of experience to their customers. So I'm relating this very much to the ability of companies to embrace change. And I was wondering if you could speculate, also from what you've seen and talking to your peers across other organisations, do you think these things are related, and is this related to the same kind of story about becoming data-driven?
Well, I think as ING, we've always had a strategy of being a data-driven digital leader, and what COVID that shows us that this strategy is right. The only sort of thing we now need to do is go faster on it.
Yeah, that's an interesting way of thinking about things. And well, I'd like to conclude by talking about the conclusions of the HBR article, actually, which, in a summary, that I really can't agree more than with these 3 points. They're really, I think, excellent points. That they say that leaders should really do 3 things. 1, focus their data initiatives on clearly identified high-impact use cases. 2, reconsider how their organizations handle data. And 3, remember that this transformation is a long-term process that requires patience, fortitude, and focus. And Kees, do you agree? And what's your take-home message?
Yeah, I will fully agree with what is coming out of that article. I think what I would add to this, and I think it comes a bit back in the first point, is that being data-driven is something for everyone, not just for the CDO, not just for the chief analytics officer. So really thinking about in everything you do is how can I find a data-driven way of doing this better? So I think that is the key cultural change we need to embrace as data-driven organizations. Especially on that last point, what is important, I think, to invest in now is really in the skills and capabilities of your people. In the end, being data-driven is not only something that is from top management, but it's also about the people on the floor actually being able to use data-driven technology, being able to understand what type of questions they can answer. So I think one of the things we're doing in ING as well is really investing in data fluency of our staff. And I think that is something that that's a long investment, but if you do that now, then that will pay off in the end and will help you become more data driven and deliver more value from that ultimately.
Awesome, excellent, fantastic talking with you today, Kees. And to our audience, if you're an innovation leader struggling with the same issues, myself, Leap Beyond, are here to help on the tech or the process. Holistically, reach out to talk, and let's change these statistics on success together. Thanks very much, sir. Until next time.